Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Beer Blather 208. Optics be damned. This is Saul Montes Bradley, the largest human repository of useless information directly from London, England. Not Londonistan. Londonistan is a few miles over that way. And this guy over there, Thomas Victor, the only living expert in World War One flamethrowers from Californication. And I'm going to get to how are you, Thomas, and all the jazz. We're doing this in our Quadrum TV channel in Odyssey, three timelines in X, formerly Twitter, and YouTube, though we're not going to be in YouTube through the end. You probably know this. And YouTubers, you have a link there to come over here to Odyssey. Please do. We're not going to check on the chats anywhere but on Odyssey. If you'd like to support us, please come to Odyssey, click on support, and put it back into the channel, or the $sign for the chats so that you can contribute through the comments, or join as a member of the channel, and you're going to get a few perks and programming for members only. And if none of that is satisfactory to you, come to quadverum.com/support us, and you will be supporting this channel and Social Quadverum. Now that I'm done with my shameless pandering, hello, Thomas. How's California doing?
Well, the neighbors started partying about an hour ago. I don't know what the occasion is. It appears that they're renovating the interior, and then the mistress of the house tells them to do it all over again, and then they tear everything out and do it again. And so today the family moved back in, and so they're having a party to celebrate. And we're about an hour, maybe an hour and a half into it. So nobody knows how long it's going to go. But it's, the discombobulation of doing our show this early, and then, the full-fledged party this early. I'm sort of on another planet right now. I keep making mistakes. I keep leaving things. It's like, oh, I'll put this book here on the back of the armchair. It's like, why didn't you put it in the bookshelf where you know where it is?
Right.
That sort of thing. So I'm very confused today. I'm very foggy and sort of just trying to figure everything out. So I will say, for the primary, I got there's a guy who was a lifelong Democrat who suddenly became a Republican, and he's running against a Republican, and the only argument this guy is making against the guy he's running against, he supports Trump. That's it. He supports Trump.
Wow, that is unforgivable.
In California, you bet.
Yes, I know.
And you look at the newly minted Republican, and he's just got that horrible, greasy, standard politician. His commercials show him. He's got this sort of drugged smile, and he's just listening to everybody. He's a Navy veteran, so he's helped veterans, and he's shoveled money to everybody, and he just smiles benevolently, like a stoned Buddha, and he's got a very unfortunate chin line. He insists on being photographed in profile, talking to people. And when you see him from the front, just looks like a normal guy. When he turns to the side, it's like, oh my God. You know,
Like
he
he's been deprived of iodine since early infancy.
well, he's just it's. I mean, okay, I don't plan on getting any cosmetic surgery, but in their old age, both my parents developed these very prominent lizard sacks, and
Mm.
it was distracting when they like talked very animatedly. So
Like a
if that
turkey.
happens, I'm getting it removed. That's the only thing.
A
Crow's,
turkey neck.
yeah, I guess you're right. Now that I think of it, it took me a second. Turkeys have those wattles, they're called, and yeah. So that's my only fear about aging is that I don't want to develop um, something that looks terrible in profile.
If I ever do, I'll just go. I'm just gonna go gobble gobble through life. Just assume the turkey nests. Turkey nests?
Or
What the fuck am I saying? Yeah.
I guess we could just grow a beard to hide it. Um, the longer the
I, I,
turkey.
I thought of that. I thought of that.
Yep. Now there's a lot of people. My favorite example is George Lucas. George Lucas insists on having a short trimmed beard, but he's got a double chin below the beard. And
Mm.
you know, if you're going to have a Tucker Carlson double chin, just grow a long beard to hide it. Nobody will ever know.
Right.
So that's just my only fear about aging is just getting waddles. But
Nah, you're gonna be okay. If not, I know a nice Sicilian guy. He's great with a razor blade. Can take those waddles out in seconds.
well, apparently they cook them the way you cook chicken. They cook them with the microwave gun or something. And
No, that's too much information for me.
I don't want to have a big scar that looks like I got some sort of emergency tracheotomy or something. Or I guess a
Right.
scar is right here, but I don't want to have
It,
a
it,
big scar.
you can pull it from the back. You can pull it from the back and put a knot in there, just like Pelosi.
Well, if you recall, at the beginning of his presidential campaign, Joe Biden had a razor sharp jawline. And come to think of it, when he debated Sarah Palin as a vice presidential, was he in his? He was starting the second term, I guess. Um, no, McCain was in 2008, right?
Yep.
Okay, so
But
when
actually, he wasn't in 2008 because he cracked out.
yeah, I mean he
Yeah.
as somebody predicted he was going to fail with honor, and that was exactly what he did.
Mm.
But the problem is he sacrificed Sarah Palin, and Sarah Palin is the Israel of politics in that she has a reputation that's entirely undeserved.
Yep.
People people believe the Tina Fey from Saturday Night Live
Yep.
parody instead of the real Sarah Palin, and this is what's amazing to me is this. I mean, you and I were speaking yesterday, and I was talking about Bill Maher. Bill Maher is running through. He's got an HBO show, and he's got his own show where he does one-on-one interviews. And he's having an extremely bad run of conservative guests who were questioning him about how much factual knowledge he has. And Bill Maher, he didn't know who Klaus Schwab was. He didn't know what the World Economic Forum was. He has no idea. He hadn't heard of the pipe bombs on January 6th that were left outside the RNC and the DNC
How,
head.
by the way, how the fuck could he not have heard? I heard of those pipe bombs on January 6th.
So not
They were all over the news.
everybody heard it, but Bill Maher, apparently, by his own admission, reads only the New York Times. And what he does is it's a logical fallacy known as appeal to authority. If it
Yeah.
appeared in the New York Times, they are authoritative, so it must be true. And, you know, how much of what appears in the New York Times is true, factually true?
Less and less every day. Listen, if you go by the New York Times, you probably believe that Stalin was a humanitarian,
Yeah.
that the Russians never killed anybody, much less 7 million Ukrainian peasants. Not peasants, actually, human farmers. It's the closest thing to an American farmer there was in that part of the world. And they never sent anybody to the Gulag because, Duranty, the Pulitzer Prize winning New York Times envoy to Moscow, said so when he was getting all of his editorials written by Russian intelligence. And it hasn't gotten better, it has gotten worse since.
Well, and what's funny about him is that at the same time he was making all these pronouncements, there was an extremely famous and to this day very good movie starring Greta Garbo called Ninochka.
Ninochka, one of my favorites.
And Ninochka was strictly historically accurate about the purges.
Yes.
And what they did was, when presenting all this dark information, they presented it
With humor.
well, yeah, and not humor in that, oh, let's all laugh at massacres,
No,
but
no, no.
when Ninochka, who's a high level Soviet apparatchik who's been sent to Paris because the Russian diplomats in Paris have gone native, they've gone Parisian, and she's there to straighten them up. And when she arrives, they ask her, how are the purges going? And she says, they're going very well. There are many fewer but much better Russians, and that sort of thing. And the tagline for that movie, it was the first time Greta Garbo, who had a rather austere reputation in her movies, Greta laughs, and she horse laughs in this movie. And it's a great movie, but the point is that the movie Ninochka was telling us the real story about the Soviet Union, while the New York Times was lying.
Was lying through their teeth. My favorite scene in Ninochka is Peter Lorre, because, by the way, all of the actors in that movie are first rate.
Yeah.
And Peter Lorre is one of the Russian diplomats that goes native in Paris, having a lot of fun. And if I recall, first they sent some agents to straighten them out, and when those agents fail, then they say Ninochka, the big bad wolf. And when the first agents arrive, they find Peter Lorre in a party in Paris, drinking champagne, dancing, and he's dancing the Kasachov
Mm-hmm.
with his armpits on chair backs so as not to fall flat on his ass. And one of them looks at him and says, "Comrade, you have turned into a capitalist pig." And from the chair, slightly exophthalmic, only Peter Lorre can get away with this. He looks up at them and said, "Yes, I have. And if things work my way, every day I'm going to be a little bit more of a capitalist and a little bit more of a pig."
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a movie.
You keep that shit. It was amazing.
Yeah, and it was accurate.
Yes.
The movie The Death of Stalin is not accurate about the circumstances that followed Stalin's death, in the sense that they couldn't be, because why would anyone watch it? It was dramatically impacted. But the movie The Death of Stalin, which is also a black comedy, is very accurate in that by that period in his Stalin died in 1953, and by that time in his reign, he was making up daily death lists and giving them to Beria, the head of the internal security, and Beria would send his men out, and in the scene when he's giving them copies of the list, he tells them, number 2, kill him in front of his wife before you kill her, and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
It's incredible that there are Americans rather, who think that that's fine and dandy, and they all seem to work for the New York Times. And it's I mean, I saw a quote today: Biden is giving the Ukrainians enough so that they don't lose, but not enough for them to win. And
Welcome to the club. That's what he's been doing.
And it's amazing. He's doing that because he's owned in part by the Russians. And so we have a president who's owned by the Russians, owned by the Chinese, and owned by the Iranians. And if you ever said that on any mainstream media show, they would scream at you like enraged monkeys. They would.
Yes.
They would.
Are you talking about Trump?
Yeah.
There's no about Trump.
And it's really funny because it's like, do you know what you guys are defending? Why are you defending? What has Biden brought us that is good globally? Why are you so invested in this guy winning? And I don't know. It's amazing. And
he's
that's
not Trump, which is going to be interesting now.
Yeah. No, he's not Trump. Even though he's causing, he's an agent. I mean, they call Trump an agent of chaos. That's the funniest thing in the world. I mean, it's like,
considering how Biden has sunk the world into chaos.
Under Trump, the world was more stable than it had been in ages, and Trump knows the secret of stability is that you, under the table, tell people. Did you ever see the Lee Marvin movie, The Dirty Dozen?
Oh, God, 1,000 times or more.
Yeah.
One of my 3 favorite movies.
And there's a scene at the beginning when he's choosing the 12.
The 12 sons of bitches who are going to go with him.
Right. And
suicide mission.
I forgot his name. He was an actor and a director, married to Jenna Rollins. But he's refusing to march. He's refusing to take part in drills. And Marvin is laughing, and he's like, come here, son, come here. No, come here. He puts his arm around him, and he goes, now listen to me, you little son of a bitch. You're going to march, or I'm going to kick your face in. Got that? And he's saying it with a smile, and that's what Trump does. Very politely, and that's what Trump does.
Politely.
He tells people, look, we're here to help, and if you invade this country, we're going to destroy you.
Listen, I always say this. I think Trump one day is going to tell it. I believe it. It was. I got it from a guy who had an office next to the Oval Office in the West Wing, when Trump essentially told Putin that if he didn't just stop and withdraw, and if he invaded Ukraine. What Trump told him is, I'm going to bomb the Kremlin first and then take care of your units.
Yeah.
And suddenly Russia disappeared, and the expected full invasion had to wait until after Trump was out of office.
Yeah. And now we can see that Russia is in no shape. I mean, the 3-day war in Ukraine has stretched into 2 years, The Russians are closing in on 400,000 dead. That's just dead. So
Did you see they lost another A50 today?
yeah, and okay, here's what's
The
really funny.
AWACS?
All these weirdo experts are saying that the Russians shot it down because the Ukrainians have no missiles with that range. Yes, they do.
Oh,
They took
God, they're so stupid.
they took a Soviet missile called the S-200 and they gutted it except for the exterior and they recreated it. It was a ground to air defense missile and they recreated it as a long range modern weapon. And they fired two of them at the A-50 from Ukraine because it's got the range. It's got a
Yep.
300-kilometer range. And the Russians didn't actually they didn't actually fire at it. One missile, if you saw the video of this is the Russian AWACS, it was dropping flares frantically. One of the Ukrainian missiles hit a flare and detonated. Then the second one hit the A-50 and brought it down. So the Ukrainians are shooting down one Russian aircraft, sometimes two, per day for the last 10 days.
You know that there is absolutely no way the Russians can replace that.
No.
No way, Jose. They cannot make them faster. If they lose two aircraft per week, they're already past the replacement rate. They've lost 10 in the past week. And the AWACS type is like what? How many did they have to begin with? 6?
They had 7, and now they've lost. Prigozhin shot one down. The Ukrainians have now shot down 2, and I think there was one that was in Belarus, and somebody landed an explosive drone on it and blew up the range.
Yep.
So
what are we talking? They already lost 50% of their capabilities there.
But the number 7 is only the ones they have, not the ones that were airworthy at any time. So they may not have any more. If they have 3 left, how many of those are airworthy?
Yeah, no, good question. Not necessarily 3 that we know of. And the S-34s and S-35s are dropping like flies.
Yep.
It's and this is when the Ukrainians are in the doldrums.
Yeah.
I want to see what happens when they do get artillery and the F-16s.
Well, the F-16s are now they're saying it's going to arrive in summer. So they were,
May,
pushing back the date. And whatever, I have no evidence of anything, but considering all the times that the Biden administration has sabotaged, you heard about Catherine Herridge now?
Yes.
So Catherine Herridge was fired without cause. She's probably the best investigative reporter left from CBS, and the company seized all her records, files, and notes, and is refusing to give them over to her. And what they're basically doing is Herridge fought and won a case where she was demanded to reveal her sources, and she didn't. Yeah. She won that case. So she was investigating the whole Hunter laptop story. How did all these intelligence officials claim that it was true? What was on it? All of that. And so obviously her records were seized in order to find out who her sources are on these major stories. And this is CBS doing the bidding of the federal government, which is the Biden.
You know that I'm not fully convinced yet because there is such a mess going on at CBS. She wasn't the only one who was shown the door. About 30% of their personnel got a pig to sleep, including journalists all over the system. Uh, CBS finally got into a merger with Viacom. The first thing that Viacom started doing is get rid of assets, capitalizing on assets they can capitalize and reducing expense. They got rid of the CBS headquarters in New York, which actually has given rise to a lot of bullshit conspiracy crap. Because the building was a huge black mole that I think it was a Finnish architect that designed it in the 60s, and it was called the Black Rock. So when you go to social media, you have all of these assholes saying CBS is owned by BlackRock. No, idiots. Uh, CBS owns BlackRock and not the other way around. And it's not the same BlackRock you are talking about. In any case, they sold the building. They reduced office space. They reduced personnel all across. So letting her go, she was one of the most expensive uh, journalists in CBS's system. It could make sense from the reduction of costs. Now, why are they keeping those notes? Because they will claim that whatever she was doing belongs to CBS because she was acting as a CBS employee, and the product of her efforts during that time is the property of CBS. Now, a possibility is somebody wants to get their hands onto it. Another possibility is CBS wants to publish it and not have to pay her.
Well, it's never been done before.
Which one? I don't know. Oh, yes, it has.
No, it hasn't. I mean, give me an example of who's a reporter whose notes and source lists and all that were confiscated by the company. Give me a
Well,
name.
well, give me a name. Right off the top of my head, I don't remember. I don't follow them. But I can tell you that the issue of whose intellectual property it is has come up before. And if you give me until next week, I'll give you a bunch of names.
Well, I mean, I've with the major SAG-AFTRA of all organizations pointed out that this hasn't been done before, and if everybody's lying and it's done all the time, then I don't understand why this is a big story.
Well, like I said, it could jolly well be, as some people describe, an effort to get at her work. It could jolly well be normal. I don't know yet. I don't know yet. I cannot add my name to one theory or the other. What I should say is that the issue of whose intellectual property it is, it has come up before.
Well, couldn't you argue then that she's required to give up her sources in court because the sources are the intellectual property of the company she represents? And if the company
Well,
wants,
the company does not have to give up the sources in court. And by the way, some courts will tell you that yes, there is no secret of confession with journalists, and many journalists have spent some time in jail,
oh yeah,
and some of them never revealed the sources, and others sang like canaries in a coal mine.
sure.
It's not a secret of confession. There is no law, or rather, there are several, but there is no constitutional right to secrecy of sources. Uh, it is always under discussion.
Sure. I, you know, I just, I know, I mean, the Biden administration, the Hunter laptop story. Um,
Yep.
she's the only reporter really working on this, and now, I mean,
But by the way, I agree with you. It, she's also a great reporter. I had to meet with her several times while she was investigating the Flynn case, and she's a thorough, conscientious, and very level-headed person.
yeah,
Mm.
and I mean, I understand. I guess I don't understand. Okay, you lay somebody off. If somebody is fired for cause, then you get security to escort them from the building. But if somebody's laid off,
No, you do too.
would think that the person would be allowed time to box up their possessions. You know, I in the age of Joe Biden,
Hmm.
I'm not inclined to believe any innocent explanation for anything. Just because Biden has proven himself to be a malevolent character who doesn't respect any laws whatsoever, and you know we have ample evidence of that. Um, we're living in a period where the party in power is making incredible sort of sweeping rulings that I mean not rulings, decisions that impact all our lives, and they're behaving as if we have no recourse. And the issue, I mean, the reason why this is all failing now and why it's going to continue failing is that we have recourse. And it seems that nobody on that side ever really thought about the possibility that they would push too hard, and then people would say, you know what, to hell with you, I'm going with the other side. And that seems to be exactly what's happening. I I'm very confident that, I mean, of course Trump's going to be the nominee, but I'm also very confident he's going to win, just because, what did I hear?
It looks more plausible as time goes by.
Clyburn or somebody said today that people need to stop saying that the economy is bad, because in fact the economy is great.
Well,
And
but that's Clyburn.
but that's the talking point of the party, is that
Of
everything's,
course.
and it's like,
And
how is that convincing? How,
who are you going to believe? Your lying checkbook and eyes or Biden?
well, in my case, my income was cut by a third under Joe
Yeah,
Biden.
well, that's about average. You're not so special after all. By a third is about average.
Yeah, and
And
and prices for the average American, the food prices. It's funny when they give the inflation um, percentages, they say excluding food, gas for your cars.
well, there are several measures, and yeah, core inflation, which is what we use in economic analysis, excludes seasonal articles. It excludes fuel. It excludes veggies, because this week tomatoes can go up through the roof because there was, I don't know, a heavy rain in Mexico. And 2 weeks later, it goes back to normal because we're bringing in tomatoes from someplace else. Uh, so those are not permanent changes. So it is excluded. But even when you go with core inflation, it's fucking ridiculous. And
Yeah.
by the way, you know that more than 50% of the inflation rate is housing.
Say it again.
More than 50% of the calculation of the core inflation rate is housing, the value of property.
Well, I mean, that's insane. Why would you include that in inflation when the value
Because
of
people
property?
have to leave.
Well, it's you may as well call it seasonal because look at the real estate prices and their fluctuate. You know, we don't
Yeah,
have we don't
every
have
price fluctuates.
well, but I mean you can take a mean you can't take a mean average, and the average American is spending something like 30% more in grocery bills, and
True.
you know it's
And that's why we have consumer price index, which does not exclude fuel and food. The problem is that
yeah.
the news outlets, the financial pornography networks, eh, talk about numbers all the time, changing one for the other arbitrarily, and people don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Eh, You
No,
look at the
and
consumer price index, and what you're saying is patently evident. The out-of-pocket expense of the average American has gone up 30%, about 17 to 20%, depending on the market, on food alone.
yeah, and,
Now, of
and
course, it's not the same in New York as it is in Middletown, Iowa, or Hastings, Florida.
yeah, that's why you take an average. I mean, when you say the average person is paying 30%, that means that half of them aren't, and half of them are paying more than 30%.
Exactly,
But
exactly.
um, that's nothing to brag about if you're the guy in charge of all this. And what it all comes down to is energy prices. And
Yes.
I read today that some yapper in the Biden administration said that they're allowing Russia to sell oil in order to keep oil prices down. And it's like, no, you're allowing them to sell oil because they own you, Joe. That's it. Um,
Yeah, well, they're not allowing much, by the way. Russia has been bypassing sanctions, selling through India and China at 20, $30 per barrel. They lose money with every barrel they sell through those channels. So it's not that big a deal. Um, Now it's gotten kind of worse because new sanctions came in, and suddenly Chinese and Indian companies that were funneling, say, oil into India and then selling refined product to Germany, so that Germany was not importing oil from Russia, but it was importing uh, 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 gasolines and diesel from India uh, out of Russian oil. Surprise. Well, they're not doing it anymore because the banks that cover the financial aspects of the transaction don't want to deal with Russia anymore because that makes them subject to new American and European sanctions. So if you finance an oil purchase in India from Russia, you may be out of the export import business in New York,
well,
and they're pulling out.
in the case of Russia, the Ukrainians are launching almost daily infrastructure attacks on, you know, basically everything that's contributing to the Russian military capabilities. We just had one of Russia's biggest bank just collapsed.
Yep.
So the and Putin is like Joe Biden. Putin is just going out there. I mean, yesterday was what was it? The day they shot down the A-50, it was another military holiday,
Yesterday.
Soviet Army Day or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And everything's fine. Everything's great. You know, he's things are better than ever under Putin. And I don't know. I saw a movie from 2018. It's called Hunter Killer, and it's an impossible plot about an American nuclear submarine that has to save the Russian president from a coup. And the Russian military technology is presented as better than ours. And it's like,
They, now they keep doing that. How about this idiotic distraction from Biden's woes last week with the Russian nuke to be exploded in space to destroy American satellites? And they actually made a hullabaloo. We need Congress. We need to declassify. The American people needs to know this is the most important thing. The Russians have a new secret weapon. Well, no, they don't have a new secret weapon. They're jacking off to the idea of a new secret weapon. Uh, the idea is 30 years old, at least,
well, we tried
and
it.
they're no closer to finding a solution now that they were in the 60s. We tried it and failed.
Well, what happened when we tried it was it knocked out a lot of our own satellites, and
Of course.
it left. We did it over the ocean, and it knocked out electricity and everything in Hawaii. So unless somebody could explain to me how the Russians could detonate a much larger nuke than we used in space and
And affect only American satellites, mind you.
not have it impact their own satellites, I don't know. This whole thing is just a big, you know. I've just put it in the, you know, in the open file where I don't actually, now that all our intelligence agencies are politicized, you know, who can you believe? So I don't make decisions on either side. I just say, you know, I ask questions. You know, how are they going to protect their own satellites from this? You know, because their satellites are in the same general area as ours,
And the Chinese satellites
and the Chinese satellites.
and the European satellites, everybody's got in the same neighborhood.
Right. So if the Russians are trying to knock out the entire world, um, you know, GPS location and you know, well, basically everything doesn't, almost everything, all our communications rely on satellites now.
Right now, you wouldn't have long distance communications without satellites anymore.
Yeah.
We stopped laying cable 30 years ago.
Well, it's okay. Look at the story that the Russians are getting their hands on Starlink. Um, what are they called?
Oh, the Starlink terminal so that they can use it in Ukraine.
Right. It Musk has said that it doesn't work that way. That
No, it doesn't.
working systems. I mean, the boxes, the terminals they're showing are beat all to shit. And even if they were in working order, Musk says that it's not as simple as just plugging it in. You have to have, you know, you have to get permission to use it.
You
And
have to get your. It's the same thing with, say, a satellite radio in your car. Your car comes with a satellite radio. You're in an area where you can connect to the satellite, but unless you open an account with a satellite company, give them a freaking credit card, and they connect you from their base, you ain't gonna listen to shit on your satellite radio.
yeah,
With internet, is the same thing. You have to register the receiver with Starlink. Um, Let me see. This is Ivan Ivanisevich. I'm in trench number 4 outside of Donetsk, and I have big antenna. Connect, please. That's not the way it works.
Yeah, yeah.
They
No, it's
said they said that the Russians were buying it wholesale in Dubai. There's a little bit of a problem there, and perhaps Ayo is watching us. Perhaps he can confirm it for me. But it is my understanding that there are no Starlink equipment kits for sale in Dubai.
you have to order.
Certainly no licensed ones.
Yeah. No,
So,
and theoretically, I assume that somebody could legitimately open accounts and then send them to the Russians, but it just, I
yep.
mean,
Ayo is confirming in the chat
yeah.
they cannot possibly be buying them in Dubai because they're not for sale in Dubai.
Well, also Starlink has the ability once they know what a terminal is being used for, they have the ability to cut it off. So
Yeah.
it doesn't seem likely that Musk
Hmm.
would cut off the Ukrainians from certain usages, but clear the Russians when the Russians are the ones committing wholesale war crimes on a daily basis. So
Now, the territory in Ukraine is covered by Starlink, uh, but you can't just plug something and get it. You need an account with Starlink, and that is not happening. This whole thing is propaganda and a very stupid, short-lived type of propaganda because you can debunk each and every aspect of it in minutes. Oh, they're buying equipment in Dubai. No, they're not. Might as well tell me they're buying it in Antarctica. Oh, they're connecting it there. No, they're not. And if they have to do it one by one, get somebody in Italy and then move the antenna over to Donetsk. So no, and I'll bet you 10 to 1 that something in Starlink goes blink because you have a user registered in Calabria using the equipment in a war zone. How long do you think that's going to be active?
yeah, wait,
So uh, the I would say the Russia's go-to country for shell purchases is Kazakhstan and 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 sales as well. You know that Kazakhstan exports have gone up 900%. Did you
Kazakhstan.
know that?
No,
Kazakhstan. Yeah, because Russians cannot export to a number of countries, so they send the merchandise, the product over to Kazakhstan, where they slap a label "Made in Kazakhstan" and export it as Khazar product. And the Russians pay the Kazakhs a fee, and that's it. And all of a sudden, the exports out of Kazakhstan have gone up 900% in 2 years. But
huh.
nobody knows.
I just looked and Trump won the South Carolina primary
Oh yeah,
65%. And that was Nikki
we
Haley's.
we did say at least 60-40, didn't we?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And this is the best that Nikki Haley could expect to do. Somebody said in the chat that Trump came out and gave a speech and didn't mention Nikki Haley.
Wow.
Right? Why would he?
Yeah. No,
Oh, he's a coward. He's not debating me. Why the fuck should anybody debate you? Who the fuck are you?
well, I mean, why should he debate someone if he's going to beat her 65?
There's
to
no reason.
35. I don't know. It's the okay. I mean, the title of our show is "Optics Be Damned," and in some ways that describes Trump, and in other ways, I mean, okay, it's clear that this time around he's moderating himself to a certain extent, but that's because he's already been president. And when he was president, despite what people will tell you, he was extremely presidential. Um, he wasn't appearing drunk in public. He wasn't running around in tennis shoes or
No.
shorts.
He didn't have trans people parading, shaking their titties in the South Lawn, did he?
No, he didn't. And, you know, um, countries respected us. The claim that Trump was driving away our allies is entirely false. The head of
Oh yeah.
NATO,
Oh
Trump, for
yeah.
basic
How he destroyed NATO.
the head of NATO, Trump, thanked Trump for getting members to start paying more.
Yep.
So he's extremely
Well,
presidential, and
one thing that Russia is finding out is that Trump left NATO more united than at any time since 1946.
well, okay, the Poles, that the Polish farmers are blocking Ukrainian grain, and initially they were blocking the weapons coming in through Poland, and they've agreed to let those go through, and so the videos show them getting out of the way for the weapons transfers, and then going back to the grain, and they have a valid concern if
Yeah,
Poland
they
is
do.
flooded with cheap Ukrainian grain, they lose their jobs. And okay,
Yes.
the Ukrainians aren't trying to sell in Poland, but they're still
Mm-mm. Well,
destroying the
yeah, the thing is that the grain was supposed to be shipped through Poland,
right.
eh, and then loaded onto ships and sent to Africa or wherever. But the problem is that there are some Polish guys who see the opportunity for a quick buck, and those are diverting grain, and that is where the whole hullabaloo began. They do have a valid point. It's not the Ukrainians trying to flood the market. The Ukrainians couldn't give a shit about it. They get the same amount of money, whatever happens to it, and they have markets overseas that they're feeding. But some unscrupulous assholes in Poland decided to make an extra buck by diverting some of this very cheap grain to European markets. Uh, it's gonna stop.
Yeah, let the
It's gonna
Ukrainians
stop.
sell to the people that the Poles were never selling to in the first place.
Yeah. Now that doesn't mean that Poland is going to quit aid to Ukraine. Bullshit. The Poles are the leading, right after Lithuania, I believe, supporters of Ukraine for good reason. And whatever happens, one thing cannot change, and that is supporting Ukraine is in Poland's best interest. The
Yeah,
Poles do not want the Russians at the border. Period. Everything else is bullshit.
yeah, and these are all valid concerns because I mean this is the most savage war fought on European soil and at Europe's doorstep since World War II, and
Yeah.
you know it started out with Ukraine, but we don't know what Putin. Okay, the question of what Russia can do limits what Putin will do. But on the other hand, Putin and his commanders have no regard for human life,
Mm.
especially the lives of their own soldiers. So it's entirely feasible that they would launch an attack somewhere with their 1955 T-55 tanks, you know, um, and then what happens? it's this is a case of better safe than sorry, and stop Russia now. Don't say, well, maybe if we just maybe they'll leave us alone. It's like, no, they'll never leave you alone. They hate you. They want you dead. They want to destroy you. That's how they feel.
And if they got their way in Ukraine, they would double their GDP. They would add the grains. They would add to their being suppliers of gas and oil to Europe, being the breadbasket of Europe.
Yeah,
Wonderful idea, don't you think? Yeah, that will work great. Fuck that. Get your oil and gas from Libya, Algiers, and Tunisia, and the Gulf. Tell the
well,
Russians to go fuck themselves and make sure they don't lay a hand on Ukraine's grain supply.
yeah. I
And
mean,
that's very simple, isn't it?
a country gets treated directly as a response to how it behaves, and you know, um, the Europeans have gotten invading other countries out of their systems. The Russians haven't. The only thing that seems to make Russians proud is military conquest, and you know, they're not happy unless they're conquering somebody.
Yep.
And you know, it's Russia's basically been fighting wars since Putin took power.
Now, he took power on the premise of fighting a war in Chechnya.
Yeah,
And his first actions had to do with leveling Grozny and killing hundreds of thousands of civilians, and that made him into a folk hero in Russia.
yeah, no, because this is how the Russians fight. They have no regard whatsoever for human life, for any human life. And when you have a an adversary like that, you have to stop them early because
Yep.
say the Russians can't win, but they can do an incredible amount of damage before they're finally defeated. So you stop them at the beginning,
Yep.
um, and you promise Putin, we're going for you personally.
You
You're
have to make it expensive.
what's that?
We need you have to make it too expensive for him to even think about it.
Right.
At the beginning of the war, you and I were laughing at the notion that Russia was going to conquer in a week, and I said, well, even if I am to allow for a surprise effect and catching them on the guard and whatever, but if Russia does not finish this off in a week, they're not going to have the resources to continue this war, and they're going to lose. But before they withdraw, they're going to, I used the word that you objected to, they're going to turn this into a punishment war, a war of punishment. And you objected to the use because, of course, it means something else. It, but the way I used it is what is happening that unable to target military targets, unable to overcome the Ukrainians militarily, the Russians will destroy as much of the civilian facilities as possible. They're going to go after apartment buildings, kindergartens, hospitals, uh, because they cannot do anything else. And they want to break the will of Ukrainians. And if they cannot and have to withdraw, they want to leave a Ukraine in ruins. And that's how they're fighting this war.
Yeah.
And the
And
sooner they're kicked out, the better it is for everybody.
well, this is how Russians have always fought wars, going back to the Tsarist period, the Soviet Union, the Putin period. They lack the skill to engage without causing undue collateral damage. So, I mean,
Yeah.
collateral damage is their doctrine, You inflict as much collateral damage as possible.
You don't fight in the city, you level it
You level it.
and then move on.
Their idea is that artillery, there's an old quote from the early 20th century, artillery is king. You use your artillery to destroy everything, and then the troops go in and occupy what's left. And the United States has switched over to air power as king, and it makes a lot more sense because, especially now with smart weapons, you can pick and choose what you hit. And if you see what the Israelis are doing in Gaza, there are parts of Gaza that are flattened, but there are a lot of parts that aren't. And they're using smart weapons. They're using blast effect weapons that will target troops but not destroy the buildings. So after they win and it's time to rebuild Gaza, it's not going to be as hard as people think. They're not going to leave it in ruins for decades. The UAE is already putting in desalination plants right as we speak. That's amazing.
Right. You know that there was an interesting meeting between Egypt, the Emirates, Saudi, and Israel, and they're working on several contingencies for rebuilding, and there's not going to be any lack of Arab funds for civilian infrastructure.
Nope.
There is also not going to be any kind of authority other than Israel for quite some time.
Yeah.
Uh, Israel is not going to relinquish control of Gaza to anybody, much less the Palestinian Authority. And that is assuming that the Palestinian Authority survives the shakeup that's coming in the West Bank.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll see.
no, Hamas is in the West Bank too, and they're causing as much havoc as they can.
You know they're partners with Fatah,
Yeah.
so it wouldn't make any sense to me for Israel to leave Fatah and Hamas in the West Bank uh,
No,
to
I
be
mean,
undisturbed.
Netanyahu said that giving control of the Palestinian Authority is trading one terrorist group for
For
another.
another, yeah,
He's perfectly correct. Fatah has Hamas is the Al Aqsa Martyrs brigades.
so Fatah had the Al-Aqsa brigades. They founded them before the first Intifada. When certain deadlines of the uh, Oslo Accords were coming due, all of a sudden the Al-Aqsa brigades stormed Al-Aqsa. They were a Fatah group at the time.
Okay, the Al
Um,
Aqsa Martyrs brigades is Fatah. You're right.
yeah,
And let's see, Hamas
I,
is
I I can tell you the life and miracles of every one of those assholes.
okay. That's right. Hamas is the Is al Din al Qassam brigade. So
Exactly, Al-Qassam, not Al-Aqsa, Al-Qassam.
yeah.
Mm.
So it's. I mean, Israel. Biden is now pushing very hard to force Israel into a ceasefire, which as
Not gonna happen.
no, I mean they're in the last
But
stages.
I'm loving every fucking second of it. A New York jury who have been, for the most part, uh, Democrats uh, for the past 70 years or so, for reasons that I do not fully comprehend, are finally developing cracks. About 60% of New York Jews are planning on voting Republican in the next elections. That may not be enough to turn an election in New York, by the way, But it is significant that every move Biden makes further alienates the Jewish population from the Democrats.
Yeah.
And I think that's a welcome thing. By the way, I almost forgot. London or no London, ich bin it. There we go. Uh, we're talking about the sanctions, and I remember, what did I do? What did I do? So here it is. Um, they're both the heirs of Al Husseini, and the apple didn't fall far from the tree, says Ayo. Uh, yes and no. In some fundamental, generic way, maybe yes, but no. One, you know, Fatah and the PLO are the children of Nasser, of Gamal Abdel Nasser. They were created as an Egyptian commando unit with members of the um, Egyptian army and also members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas was created much later, directly as an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, so they are related, they're cousins, but they weren't both created by Al Husseini. Um, the other thing that Ayo says here is, oh, that remember what we said about Kazakhstan becoming the export hub for Russia. They're also the import hub for Russia. He confirms the 900% increase, and by a similar number, they've increased their imports to the point that the company he works for in the Emirates is put Kazakhstan in a special approval list to make sure that the stuff they're buying is not being diverted to Russia. Ain't that lovely? We all know it. We all know it. How can they actually increase imports 900% before anybody goes, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah. I mean, our sanctions regimes, it's just like with Saddam Hussein. All these people promised us that the food for oil program was, which was a result of the sanctions, and the Iraqis could sell oil only for food. It was airtight, and then years
Oh,
later
yeah.
we found out that the UN Secretary General and his son were getting payoffs to have his people look the other way
You
while
mean
he was
Kofi Annan was getting
using
payoffs?
money to buy weapons. And
Surely you don't imply that Kofi Annan was corrupt, do you? Eh, what about Mitterrand? What about Jacques Chirac? The entire fucking government of France was in on the voucher trading for Iraqi oil. From the Minister of Interior to the President, the Prime Minister, half of the French government made out like bandits because they were getting paid in vouchers for oil that they were able to trade under the guise of the Food for Oil program, when in fact it was uh, anything from nuclear technology to whatever the crap you want. I mean, why? Why in the world? Oh, yes, no, I remember why. Clinton.
yeah,
I bet you he had a slice of it too.
of course. I mean, the Clinton. I don't know when the Clinton Foundation was started. I guess it was after he was president. But you know,
Yeah,
what's
but he
what's
was he was still in love before the foundation.
what's,
Corrupt little
what's
fuck.
bizarre about all this is that all these people get their stupid payoffs, and look at them. They end up physical carcasses. They've like it's like Putin. Putin is I mean, he's a physical disaster by now, and you know, okay, he's the richest man in the world. Big deal. Like he spends all his time in the Kremlin, or then he takes his armored train back to one of his bunkers and hides in his bunker. I
Yeah.
mean, what life?
He's gonna die the richest man in the world because he has no way of spending it.
He has no way of spending it, and the same with the Clintons. I mean, um, I don't know. It's just so bizarre. Kofi Annan. Okay, when people, his son lived the high life. He was a playboy. Woohoo! It's like, how original. I'm a playboy. I got chicks and I got a booze and I got my fast car. It's just like, oh God. I don't know. I just, people are amazing in how limited they are. That's what gets me.
Yep.
Like,
It's true.
after being really, I mean, I knew Bill Maher. Okay, Bill Maher is technically an intelligent man, but he's also a functional idiot because he has no factual knowledge on anything except what the proper sources tell him. And this is completely voluntary. And when he's confronted, he gets very upset. And even if you give him facts that contradicts everything he believes in, it doesn't matter. He's going to stick with what he believes in.
Right.
He's a Californian, and he had a guest on who was some fitness lady, and she was born and raised here, and she left. And he goes, "Oh, you're one of those." And it's like, well, why should she sacrifice her quality of life out of political loyalty? Like, what the hell is that? I don't know. I have no idea.
I suppose that the only thing that serves as a consolation for those who have chosen to live in the shitter is that they have company. And the worst you can do is abandon them and show that there is actually a way out of the shitter. And you don't take it because you are just loving the shit.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
just puts him in evidence. Gillian Michaels says to him, I have no idea who she is.
yeah. She was a fitness lady, and she came to fame on a show called The Biggest Loser, where you had a bunch of
Hmm.
contestants losing weight together, and she was their fitness coach. And she was confronting Bill Maher about his statement that life in California was great. The inflation, we came out of COVID stronger than we were before, and it's like there's still for rent on the businesses around here that were here since I started coming here in 1969. Now they're as dead as Julius Caesar, and that was directly because of COVID. Um, I don't know. I just the mind boggles. And can you imagine being so loyal to Bill Maher that you're going to lie to yourself about be so loyal to Biden that you'll take any hit, you'll lie to yourself about absolutely everything to protect this guy who wouldn't even stop his car if you were if he saw you in a car accident on the side of the road hanging bloody up
Right.
car. Biden would just drive by and say, somebody else will do it. What? I don't know. And even in his prime, Biden wouldn't stop and help you. Um,
Hell, in his prime, he would have stopped to take your wallet.
yeah, and sniff your kid's hair.
Yeah. I mean, the guy was corrupt to the bone. From I always tell people, some think I'm kidding. I'm not. Research it. Biden won his first election to Congress with support from the goons of the Teamsters. And they did not spare themselves a single dirty trick, slashing tires, stealing flyers, threatening store owners that showed the opponents' flyers. I mean, they really did a muscle job to get him elected. This guy is corrupt from his first venture into politics 50 years ago.
Yeah,
When he had an aneurysm explode, there were people sighs of relief because they were finally rid of this asshole, and he came back worse than ever.
yeah. I mean, he's been the same since the beginning of his tenure in Congress. I mean, he was elected when he was 29, and
Yeah, by the mob.
by the mob. I mean, he was, and he was a liar. You know, lunch pail Joe. I'm just like you, and it's just like, you know, if I hear that one more time. What I love about Trump is that, you know, he'd be the first to say, no, I'm not like you at all, but I know what's important to you, and I can help us all achieve that by creating the right atmosphere for you to achieve it on your own. But you can't achieve it with all the headwinds being thrown in your way by my you know the people opposing me. And you know, people know that, they respect it.
But by the way, we may start showing videos or something. So, folks in YouTube, this is as far as we get here. Please come to Odyssey to finish the show, and you have the link right in the description under the video in YouTube. It's going to remain there. Just click on it. Otherwise, you guys have a good night.